I'm delighted to introduce Sonia Neale. The inaugural SANE Australia's Hocking Fellowship for 2014 was awarded to Sonia, enabling her to pursue valuable research overseas, of which we may hear about today. One of the outcomes from her research was the establishment of a BPD consumer support group that meet weekly. Let me hand over to Sonia.
Help. Yes, thanks.
Yeah, I think it's this one. Is that the one you pressed?
Thank you. Okay, I feel a bit more confident now. Can everyone hear me? No. No, you can't? Wow, you'd be the first person in the universe who can't hear me. My children have never complained they can't hear me. My name's Sonia Neale and I have a lived experience of BPD. A little bit about myself. I have 3 adult children, so I do know how to speak loudly. I won the SANE Australia Fellowship last year, which really gave me a grand opportunity to put in place everything I'd ever want to do with BPD. So, first of all, what is borderline personality disorder? Sometimes it's not what we think it is. For me, I needed a secure base. I needed somewhere where I could go that I could call home. It certainly wasn't my family of origin's home because I found that quite unsafe. So for me, my secure base when I was an adult and I was in hospital with my 3rd child with postnatal depression, I was introduced or assigned to my therapist, and that was 20 years ago. I still see her. She's still my secure base. Within the circle of security, I have a secure base, which means when I get dysregulated, out of sorts, or I'm totally pissed off and about to have a meltdown, I have a teddy bear she gave me for my 50th birthday. And I only have to look at that teddy bear and I feel her in my heart. That's pretty much what a secure base is. So when you're 2 years old, you've got an actual teddy bear or a security blanket, and that kind of acts as your transitional item from your mum. But sometimes we don't have that secure base, even as an adult. Now, I found that although I did not attend emergency departments on a regular basis, I understand the thought processes behind why people attend hospitals so much. There's the attachment to a hospital system. It's a secure base. It's where you go when you're out of sorts and you feel unsafe. The trouble is, a hospital emergency department is not a safe place for someone with BPD until we educate people in the process of how to deal with people with BPD at an effective level so that when we go there we do feel safe. So essentially the secure base as a hospital isn't safe. So when I went overseas, I visited a place called The Haven, run by Dr. Heather Costello. Now before I left, I read her book, Temperamental Trauma. Now essentially she got 4 people with BPD to interview, I think it was 100 people with BPD, to find out exactly what they wanted in a service. And essentially what people wanted was a secure base where they felt safe to go to, a place that wasn't a hospital where you do not feel safe. Since she was the CEO of The Haven for 10 years, she wrote another book. Now this is the book I'm going to get hold of. She only had the book launch a couple of days ago. But in it, it covers everything that I want to bring to Western Australia to start up the first Haven. This is what the Haven in Colchester, Suffolk, the UK looks like. I visited it there around about this time last year. It's an 18-room house. It was an old rectory, and as only English houses can be, it is absolutely stunning inside. I wish I could just pick it up and bring it over to Western Australia and plonk it down with all the services as well. The Haven came about in 2003. The National Mental Health in England wrote a report entitled Personality Disorder, No Longer a Diagnosis of Exclusion. It was a policy implementation guidance for the development of services for people with a personality disorder. As a result of this document, funding for 11 different borderline personality disorder-based pilots were initiated, and the Haven was one of them. It's a brick building with crisis and day services, so it's an alternative to emergency department presentations. It's a very safe alternative. When you go there, you've got a bed. With that bed comes the staff who are kind and nurturing, who understand what you're going through. It's based on attachment theory, and it's based also on trauma-informed care. They understand why you get upset. They don't really care about what caused you to be upset. They're more interested in what's happening for you right now. They don't go back to the, all your initial trauma and everything. They deal with what's happening for you at the moment. What particular crisis caused this to happen? And it can be something like a financial crisis. I can remember 10 years ago when we didn't have a lot of money. Bills were due, we had no food in the house, 3 kids. I couldn't work because I was so sick. And my husband was under enormous stress. And I started getting anxiety attacks. I went to the doctor. I was put on this medication, that medication, the other medication. Still Knox, Valium, antipsychotics, anti-anxiety pills, antidepressants, until I was so toxic I ended up in hospital with all the symptoms, with all the side effects, but absolutely none of the benefits, not a single benefit. So I was there for a week, and the psychiatrist decided to up my medication because it wasn't working. So after 7 days, I was kicked out, and I was more unwell than when I first went in. Now, this is a private psychiatric hospital. That was where I got my diagnosis. So I've never been back to Perth Clinic. I never felt safe there. That was not a safe haven for me. I felt stigmatised and discriminated against. And I felt as though I was toxic and clogged up with medication. I haven't taken any medication since, and I found that I've just healed through my natural education processes, yoga, walking in nature, walking on the beach, and just getting in touch with who I am, as Catherine was talking about this morning. So within the Haven, there's quite a lot of services, and I found it to be very homely and comfortable. People sat down, talked to each other, and I just found the atmosphere there, the feeling I got when I was there was one of safety. It looks not unlike a normal house, and that's the whole point of it. As only England can have, they've got beautiful gardens, and I fell in love there. I really loved that place. It was just beautiful. The people there, there's an atmosphere, a culture of positivity. Now, when I said to them, you're talking so positively, what's the secret here? And they just laughed and said, that's the culture, we have to talk positive. That's one of the rules and regulations surrounding the Haven. It has to be a safe place. That's not to say you can't talk about things that are bothering you, but the negativity I'm talking about is more of the destructive sort. So the Haven's an alternative to emergency department presentations. In order to register for the Haven, you ring up and you turn up. You can be self-referred or referred by anybody, so that it's not a difficult process. You go there and you're registered. So that means that if you have an anniversary crisis or some sort of crisis that comes up, they already know you. You don't have to tell your story over and over and over again. So that means that you come in, you register, And when you do need the services, you turn up. They have a 24-hour phone line. They also have a taxi service. So you ring up and you say, I need help, and they say, what's the address? We'll send a taxi. You get picked up by a taxi, and then you get 2 or 3 weeks at the Haven, depending on how long you want to stay there. You can do that, I think, up to 6 times a year. So it's the most amazing place. Inside the Haven itself, there's weekly therapy and group programs, DBT skills group, counselling service, computer skills group, creative writing, addiction workshop, healthy living groups, friendship groups, welfare rights advisory services, arts and crafts, gardening, outdoor wellbeing, family and carers groups. Those are not terribly well patronised, apparently. They don't have a lot of carers turning up, which surprised me because I found the opposite in Australia. There's a huge groundswell of carers that are creating different services. But it wasn't like that over there. They also have massage and trauma reduction therapy, reflexology, walks, outreach visits, yoga, etc. It's a wraparound service, which means that everything you need within the Haven is there for you, and it creates its own community. It has rules and regulations, policies and procedures, and if you transgress these, the therapeutic community itself will be the ones who decide what the consequences are. So if you cut or self-harm on the premises, bring alcohol or drugs on the premises, they have meetings and they make decisions on what the consequences will be. It might be that you don't attend for 1 or 2 weeks the services that are there. So that means that your peers, the people who are your equals, who have BPD, they're the ones who decide on the consequences. So you are judged by your peers. You're not judged by somebody who has power and authority over you. You're judged by people who will say that the Haven is not a safe place if you transgress these rules. And we need those rules in place, because if we don't have rules and you do these things, we could lose our funding, we could lose the Haven, we lose our secure base, we have to go back to emergency departments, which are unsafe. So essentially everyone keeps themselves safe there. While I was there as well, there's a place called Suffolk Mind, which is sort of connected with the Haven. They all know each other. And there was 2 day services that Suffolk Mind provides in the east coast of the UK. One of them's in Ipswich, the other is in Bury St Edmunds. And they're both like a day centre, and they have support groups there, and you can have lunch there. And they have various different activities and jewellery making, and they have outings, and they have all sorts of different things. It's somewhere where you can go for the day, and that happens twice a week. They have their own, their own particular set of dynamics. But they run well, and again they're staffed by beautiful people who are loving and caring and really look after them. So I also went to Canada as well. Canada has a support group, and the support group is one that I have used to model the support group I run at United Care Western Merriwa in Western Australia. These are badges that the people themselves decided to make up. While I was over there, I attended one of the groups, and there was about 25 women there, and it was run by a lady who is a carer, and her daughter has BPD, and the daughter was the one who was, the mother was the one who was running the group. And she ran it so beautifully and effectively and managed to keep control of the conversation, direct the conversation and how it was going, so that no one got dysregulated or upset. And I found that I was with people who I felt were my tribe when I was over there. I really felt as though I had found my tribe after searching in the wilderness for so long. It was fantastic to sit with people who could read my mind, who knew exactly what was going on in my head, and who had a really good sense of humour and could laugh about it. And that was the best part. There was a lot of laughter in all the support groups and at the Haven. Having a good sense of humour can help you get through whatever it is you're getting through if you're with people who are your own tribe. It's a very primitive thing. So I'll talk a little bit about the group that I have established in Merriwa. First of all, when I was on my trip, I went to Texas and I spoke to a lady there who ran a support group and told me all the many ways how not to run a support group. And she found it very difficult. She's a lovely, passionate lady, and what she did was she started up a support group by herself. And she started up the support group in a place that was quite isolated and it wasn't surrounded by an organisation. So she let the people in the group phone her, email her, text her all hours of the day and night, and she was basically there for crisis support. She burned out very quickly, and she is now working as a counsellor. She's not running a group anymore. So I learnt more from her about how not to run a group than how to run a group. So essentially, the facilitators in our group have to have a lived experience, and we like to have at least 2 people. When you have people with BPD all in one spot, someone is going to get triggered by something, and you never know what that is. I always thought it would be something like, sexual abuse or cutting or alcohol or drugs, but sometimes just talking about the fact that there's been a little bit of happiness in your life can trigger someone who doesn't have happiness in their life at that particular moment. And I know I've been triggered many a time by my therapist, who I've always thought has had the perfect life. And when she tells me something that is going well in her life, I really stew about that, and I find that that can be a trigger and a catalyst for some form of self-harm, some form of overeating or hating myself or something. So the better her life is, the more I hate myself. So I have to watch out for triggers that are not so obvious, and to watch people's reaction, and to make sure that if someone looks like they're getting triggered or looks like they're getting upset, I take them to one side and have a little chat with them about how they're doing. And there's also somebody in the room to take care of the rest of the group. So we've got all bases covered. It's not easy running a group, as I'm finding out. You don't just sit there and become part of the conversation. You're always on the lookout for other people and to see that what they're sharing is appropriate, and that what they're sharing is relevant to the topic that we're talking about. So it's quite difficult. It's been quite a learning curve for me, because I get triggered by the people in the support group as well. As far as the Haven goes, I'm having conversations with people in Perth, key people who run organisations, to get a working party together so that we can write a document and take it to the Minister and the Mental Health Commissioner, because I want to see the Haven WA established. And the CEO, Monique Williamson of Mental Illness Fellowship of WA, is the one who is facilitating this process for me. So she's taken me under her wing. She's mentoring me around talking to other people, other CEOs who I find terribly, terribly scary, because I'm a peer support worker, and these people are there and I feel as though I'm there. There's a huge discord in between that I'm trying to bridge the gap and say, hey, we're all people working on the same page. Doesn't always work that way. I can feel myself feel quite insignificant compared to other people who have reached the top of their organisation. So it's very rewarding doing this, very scary at the same time. But I learnt on my trip. I was away for 3 months, and virtually 2 or 3 times a week I was talking to people who I felt had better skills, better qualifications and more knowledgeable than me. And yet everywhere I went I was treated with a lot of respect, and I was treated as though I was the one with the knowledge. And it finally occurred to me that I did have the knowledge. I have that insider knowledge that no CEO will ever have unless they have that lived experience of BPD where you actually know what it is like to be the person you're trying to support and help. How much time do I have left? 5.5. 5, okay. All right. Essentially, in the Haven itself, we held a forum. 25 people attended it, and we wanted to find out what people wanted in the Haven in WA, because the population is different than one in England. We've got far more distance. We've got the heat. Our public transport system isn't the best over there. So at the forum, we started off by asking people on a scale of 1 to 10 whether BPD services were needed, and people said 20. There is a huge need for somewhere for people with BPD to go, so they feel safe, so they know that they've got a safe place there. So we wondered whether or not it was best to self-refer or have a formal diagnosis. It was thought that the best direction would be towards a formal diagnosis, because then you've got access to these services that may exist in the future, because they certainly don't seem to exist now. Having a diagnosis, for me, was very important. I used the 9 criteria to work out what my life meant to me, because I certainly fulfilled all of them. So I went through all the abandonment issues, impulse, interpersonal skills, and with my therapist I worked on all of them to the best of my ability. I took responsibility for myself. As Catherine said this morning, the first step towards healing is responsibility, because nobody else is going to do this for me. If the only life you can save is your own, that's the one you have to save. So I found that that was meaningful for me, and it's not necessarily meaningful for everyone else. In the support group that I run, we do go through the symptoms, and at the moment we're dealing with chronic feelings of emptiness. What it means beyond those words. So back to the Haven. We thought it would be good to have it in a rural or semi-rural area. So you could have veggie patches, and you could have, chooks, and you could have ducks, or you could have any sort of animal, maybe a dog or something. A Haven dog. They have a Haven cat at the Haven, and that is something that really unites people and brings people together. So we thought in a semi-rural area, somewhere near a drug and alcohol rehab that is up near Ellenbrook Way, where we are, so that you've got the alcohol and drug services there, and we thought we'd put the Haven next door to it, which means that it's also on a public transport route as well. So it means we've got at least bus access there, because I know a lot of people with BPD are on disability and don't have cars, and that's another reason why people don't get the services that they want, is because they don't have the transport. That's why I'm finding with the support group we have a small core of people. We have some people who just come through and see the group once or twice, and they don't come back. But we have a core group of people, and I found the reason they keep coming back is because they've got cars, so it's easy for them to get there. There was one lady who rang up. She wanted to come, but she was in a wheelchair, and the only way she could get there was a disability cab, and she couldn't catch a disability cab because she didn't have the money for it. So she ended up not coming, which is a real shame. Transport is a problem, and Perth transport's not the best. We thought within the Haven the workforce should be peer workers with a BPD lived experience, but need to be upskilled, as using your experience can be exhausting and limiting. So you need to have certain skills even though you've got your lived experience. One of the skills I think would be greatly needed is simply the 4 core skills of DBT, but especially the mindfulness and the distress tolerance. You need to have your own stuff pretty much in check before you can help someone else. It's the old saying, put your own mask on first before you can put anyone else's on. Funding. Now, should this be a free service or not? I know Serenian House, which is alcohol and drug rehab, part of your disability pension, or most of it, goes towards your upkeep at the house. So we weren't sure whether or not we could do that at the Haven or whether it would be totally government funded. I think sometimes if you could put a little bit of cash towards your service, you tend to take it more seriously and treat it better than if you get it free. I know that sometimes if I get something free, I don't seem to appreciate or value it as much as if I've put my own contribution towards it, be that monetary or be that something physical or giving up my time, something like that. Okay. Thank you very much.